ever get a nagging feeling in the back of your head telling you to do something that's just a little too strong to ignore? Some kind of otherworldly presence giving you a hint of what's going to happen in the near future? While I may be being a little overdramatic for the related event, my first ever experience at Comic-Con would have turned out quite differently if I had ignored this little bit of divine intervention. I'd been interested in attending a convention of some kind for a long while, and I almost went to an anime con in 2020, but you can most likely guess how that one turned out. The second closest I got was a Monster Mania con in 2022 to meet the frontman of a band I really like, Spencer Charnas of Ice Nine Kills, whose face has been sitting on top of my computer since the start of this channel. I promise I'm not crazy. It was a gift from a friend, and I forgot I had put him up there while I started recording this channel. Anyway, when the chance to go to New York Comic Con came up, I was a bit hesitant. As much as I wanted to see what it was all about, attending would have meant I had to go into New York City, which I've never really been a fan of. Plus, as I was looking at the guest list back in July or August, I didn't really see anyone that stuck to me as a guest, though I found out that this was not the final guest list, but that'll come up in the story later. Nevertheless, I bit the bullet, said, who needs comfort zones? And me and my dad bought tickets to go. The next step was to take a page out of friend of the channel's Night of Arcane's book and scour my art to see what kind of posters I wanted to get signed. It was tough to find a balance between an artwork relating to somebody who would be there and a piece that I was happy with and confident enough to show a complete stranger. My front runner was going to be The Mighty Samurai, my Chris Sabat-inspired voice actor fusion, until I caught wind that Jacksepticeye was going to be at Comic-Con the day I was scheduled to go. And so I got to work making a brand new art piece from scratch that I wanted to get signed by the first ever YouTube gamer I watched, and one of the biggest inspirations I had when I first made my first YouTube channel some 8 or 9 years ago. And said image is what's being drawn on the screen now. I figured if I met him, I could quickly pitch boss level, link in the description, wink wink nudge nudge, and then we could have Jacksepticeye on for an episode, and then we would have such a great time and be friends and it'd be awesome. I made the image and ordered just the one poster and waited for the day to come. And waited and waited. I'm not too sure what I was waiting for. I was set to go to Comic-Con on a specific day and that day wasn't coming any faster, so I probably could have gotten some stuff done instead of just staring at a wall for a few days. Whoops. And so, a couple weeks later, the day finally arrived. I got up early and double and triple checked to make sure I had everything. Money for souvenirs, my hand-painted Amazing Digital Circus jacket, which I actually got a few compliments on, which was really cool, posters, and the likes of all that stuff. I was ready to go. But going through the guest list one more time to create a small little itinerary of where and when things were happening, got this little thing in the back of my head telling me that I should have printed the voice actor fusion poster, even if I did it alongside the Jacksepticeye poster. However, this was roughly about an hour before we were set to leave to go into New York, so ordering a poster off of Teespring was out of the question. I did not have weeks to wait. And thus began a frantic search to find a printing place that was A, open, B, able to print a decently sized full-color poster in an hour or less, and C, was not a Lord of the Rings-esque voyage away from my house. My original plan was to run down the clock until the Staples opened at 8 and hope they could do it in 30 minutes or less. But luckily, my mom suggested using CVS instead, which was already open. So, Section A of my requirements was fulfilled. However, the CVS was a little far from me and down a road that was notorious for being crowded constantly, especially during the early morning of a weekday. So in order to not waste what little time I had left, I decided to call ahead and see how long it would take.
Hello, CVS Photo Department.
Hi, I was just wondering how long it would take to get an 18 by 24 poster printed.
Did you mean a 16 by 20?
I didn't. But for the sake of time. Sure.
It shouldn't take too long.
Okay. Do you have a time estimate?
No. But if you send it now, we can get it printed right away.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I could hear the time ticking away in my head. I quickly threw the image onto a USB drive that I just happened to know was sitting at the bottom of my backpack for the last 3 or 4 years, and even more surprisingly that it was functional, and rushed down to the CVS while still abiding by road safety laws. There were 2 women there when I arrived, and the one who wasn't on the phone instructed me how to upload the photo and order the print. As it turns out, 18 by 24 wasn't a size they offered for printing. I couldn't do the math in my head, so I just went with an 11 by 14 instead, really hoping that it was the same aspect ratio as an 18 by 24. Spoilers, it wasn't, but it didn't cut off too much of the image, so it was fine. I ordered the picture, and the computer screen told me it would be about 30 minutes to get printed. Okay, not too bad. It was still before 8 a.m., so I figured that was more than enough time that I needed. What it wasn't enough time for was to go back home and finish getting ready and then loop back around to pick up the poster. Sure, I could have gone to the McDonald's or Dunkin' nearby to pick up some food, but instead I opted to wander up and down the aisles of the CVS until my photo was printed. I'm sure that was a sight to behold. Now, here's the part where I feel really bad about including that phone call from earlier, but it was necessary to convey the RPM of my head that morning. The woman who was on the phone called me over once the printing was done and rang me up, and she was super nice about it. I really thought I was being annoying and whatnot, asking about how long the printing would take and almost not so much demanding, but being a little assertive in asking for an actual time estimate. But she was really chill and really sweet, not to mention a lifesaver. And again, being a little overdramatic for the event in question. The new poster was secured, and with 5.5 pages worth of backstory out of the way, I can finally talk about the actual convention. Though, one real quick addition, the entire train ride and walk to the Javits Center, where the con was, I had a death grip on this poster bag. After what I had gone through that morning, there was no way I was going to take any chances of me forgetting the bag or someone running up and snatching it. Once we got to Comic-Con, it was a little after 10 a.m. if I remember correctly, and we headed directly to the show floor looking for Chris Sabat, whose signing began at 11 in the photography hall. The problem was none of the areas were labeled, at least not in a way that could be clearly seen, and the entrance that we had walked in through didn't appear to have a kiosk worth of maps or anything. Basically, if you were a newcomer to Comic-Con, like me, you're kind of out of luck. You gotta fend for yourself out there. Given the fact that there was nothing about celebrity panels on the show floor and was mostly companies showcasing games and products and people trying to sell art, it took us a lot longer than it should have to realize we were not just wandering around the wrong area of the convention, but the complete wrong floor as well. We started making our way through the rest of the con trying to look for this photography hall, and we wound up in the cosplay section, some of the panel rooms, the food trucks, the bathroom, before we finally found the actual photography hall that we were meant to go to from the get-go. We walked up and down the rows, taking in what celebrities were there, until I finally spotted Chris Sabat's banner on the opposite side of the hall. We looped around to get in line, and it was capped off. It couldn't have been more than 5 or 10 minutes past 11 o'clock, if it was even 11 o'clock at all, and this guy was already completely booked. Like, I understand that he's a voice actor in some of the biggest animes there are at the moment, being My Hero Academia, One Piece, Solo Leveling, Dragon Ball, and others, but wow, I did not expect it to fill that fast. Despite all I went through to get this poster printed before I had to leave for New York Comic Con, it didn't look like I was getting to meet Chris Sabat to get it signed. Alright, not off to a great start. And although we were essentially turned away, the silver lining was that he was set to return around 2:50 for another signing after he did a panel. So there was still a chance. The next event I specifically wanted to hit was the Jacksepticeye signing at 1:30 in the showroom. Luckily, we already knew where that was, given our first mistake. So in order to avoid a repeat of Chris Sabat, we walked over to at least scout it out before the signing began. We snaked our way up and down the aisles before we found the Bad Egg Publishing booth where he was set to be, and the Jacksepticeye signing was also capped. In fact, we were told that it had been capped since about 10:05. For reference, that's 5 minutes after the convention had opened for the day. What had apparently happened was that the day prior, Jacksepticeye was swarmed during his signing, and so for the second day, which I went to, they moved the signing to a separate secret room and handed out a limited number of wristbands that sold out almost immediately. Not that there was any mention of it anywhere on social media or anything, so that too was a bust. I went to the two main things I showed up at ComicCon for, and now I've walked away from both of them empty-handed. First ever Comic-Con, not going super great, but my spirits were still high because Chris Sabat had his second signing at 2:50 and Jacksepticeye and Bad Egg had a panel at 5 p.m. So there was still a chance to get to both of them, so I wasn't completely dejected yet. We decided to take a quick lunch break before heading towards the artist alley. Unrelated, but I got a sandwich from a cafe-esque kiosk that was surprisingly good, albeit slightly overpriced, but that's the nature of conventions. We made our way to the artist alley where I was quickly overwhelmed, but more importantly inspired, by the massive amounts of cool-looking posters, keychains, and whatnot that were available for purchase. If I didn't have just a little bit of self-control, I might have gone broke buying a whole bunch of stuff. While wandering the aisles of talented artists, there was a small crowd gathered around some rather interesting cosplayers, and I'm honestly not sure if I could even describe them without getting demonetized. If you happen to be at New York Comic Con on Friday, October 18th, then chances are you know the cosplay I'm referring to. And if you weren't there, I'll let your imagination run wild with this one. Anyway, I didn't pay too close of mind to them because a couple of feet away from them, I spotted an artist named Mary Landro that I recognized from the interwebs. I saw on her Instagram that she would be at Comic-Con. If you don't know her, she's the comic artist behind the comic Rich, which I got a signed copy of, and look at that art style. It's beautiful. We got to talking a little bit about the comic making process, and she was super nice. It was honestly probably the highlight of the Comic-Con as a whole. And after about 4 hours at Comic-Con, I was sitting at about a 33% success rate. As the time drew closer to 2:50, as in I'm pretty sure it just turned 2 o'clock, me and my father headed back over to Chris Sabat's booth, which was already swarmed with people waiting to get back online. However, what they were doing this time around was letting anyone who was there prior to Chris leaving for the panel back onto the line first before letting in the general crowds. Now, technically, me and my dad were there prior to Chris leaving, so we told them that and got onto the line. But apparently at some point after we had left earlier in the day, they started giving out sticky notes to people who were online as a sort of ticket to get back onto the line once Chris left. We didn't get one of those tickets, but they also didn't ask us to show them one. So we got onto the line without any problems. This is mostly because all the problems began after we got onto the line. Before Chris returned, the staff had split his queue into 2 separate lines. I forget what the exact breakdown of each line was, but it doesn't really matter because for roughly an hour and a half to 2 hours, neither line moved at all. It was quite impressive, actually. There was a third line to the side of us that was forming of people who had already paid and were waiting up to go meet Chris himself. Yet the 2 lines of people that they were pulling from to pay for the stuff didn't move, no matter how many new people got onto this already paid line. It was just like these random people just kept spawning at the front of the line, and so everyone in the back didn't move at all. It got so bad that a couple of people bailed to go home. Not leave to go do something else at Comic-Con, like leave the convention for good. On the other hand, a couple of other people in the line began to stage a coup. In other words, they started getting agitated and complaining to the staff. Now, I'm usually all for giving event staff and front-facing workers the benefit of the doubt. I've worked retail-based jobs before, and I know how infuriating it could be dealing with people. But there was clearly very little communication between these staff workers. I couldn't even see what the person up front taking the payments was doing that would even give me some sort of indication of what was happening. But the people who were walking up and down the lines to make sure they were in order also didn't really seem to know what to do. Whenever someone called over one of the staff members to ask, or more accurately complain about what was going on, he would just kind of laugh it off and walk away, which struck me as weird. It wasn't the most reassuring move, but whatever. Eventually, that same guy called out to the line and said something along the lines of,
"Honor system. Whoever was here earlier today, move to the right."
None of these impressions are accurate to what the people actually sounded like. Forgive me. But it turns out the line we were standing in was now a complete merge of people who were in the line earlier and people who had showed up for the 250 signing. Side note, anyone who was not at the 11 signing was told to come back at 3:30 for Chris's 250 signing. That's how many people didn't get to meet him at the start of the day. But now there were 3 lines of people waiting to pay and a 4th one of people who had actually paid. Here's the kicker. Not only was there only enough lanes for 3 lines, meaning that lines 3 and 4 were squished together in one little lane, but I heard the guy who told everyone to move over say that he had no idea that there was a separate line for people who had already made their purchase, meaning more or less, nothing was solved. The clock was ticking and it was now about 4:25, 4:30-ish when we finally got up to the pay station. Gentle reminder that there was a panel at 5 o'clock that I wanted to go to that was 4 stories up. We handed over the money without technically buying anything because I had my already printed poster. And then we got into the back of the already paid line. Just another line to wait on. At this point, most of us were in disbelief about the ordeal we just went through, and we're kind of laughing it off together as this final line slowly but surely moved along. Now, despite everything I just said, waiting in the interminable line, everyone, present company included, getting a little agitated and maybe raising their voice just a teeny amount, and the incredulous amount of lines we had to stand on, it was more than worth it. For context, a big fear I have while doing my voice actor fusion episodes is that I'll somehow mess up the research and include a character that wasn't actually voiced by said voice actor. So you could imagine I would be a little nervous showing the picture to the voice actor that it was inspired by. Luckily, my research was correct, and Chris Sabat was immediately impressed by the drawing. He took one look at it and said, "This is awesome!" Just not using the All Might voice. I explained what my voice actor fusion series was, though I didn't get to show him my channel because at that point I was very self-conscious about the people waiting in line behind me and I didn't want to take up too much time. But he signed it, combining phrases from some of the characters included in the fusion, and even naming the character, picture on screen now. And then we were on our way. And as awesome as that experience was, there was just one more little issue. He told me he wanted me to bring him a copy next time. How could I not have printed an extra copy? Especially, I was playing the scene out in my head of how cool it would be if he said he wanted a copy for himself. I was literally at the print shop that morning. All I had to do was order 2 instead of 1, and I'm sure it wouldn't have taken that much longer to print the second one. And even still, why did he have to wait until after he signed it to say he wanted one? I would have been more than happy giving him my only copy. I'm still kicking myself. Deep breaths. It's okay. That 33% success rate now jumped to a 50 to 66% success rate, depending on if you count both Chris Sabat signings as two separate events. I got to meet both Mary Landreau and Chris Sabat, and now, the big reason I came to Comic-Con, Jacksepticeye, but more specifically, a panel about actual comics. Go figure. By the time I had left Chris Sabat's booth, it was about 4:50. Perfect, you would think. That's more than enough time to make it to the panel room before it starts. Yeah, I thought that too. By the time we got up there at, say, 4:56, it was completely booked. All the sitting room, gone. All the standing room, gone. There was even a line out the conference room door of a whole bunch of people who didn't get to make it in because it was booked way before the panel started. Turns out, a following of over 30 million people is quite large, and even a fraction of that number traveling specifically to see Jacksepticeye is more than enough to fill a small conference room. Now, if you've been paying attention this whole time, you would have already connected the dots. But, to recap, I'd originally intended to go to New York Comic-Con with only the Calculester poster to get signed by Jacksepticeye. But a mere hour before I was set to leave, I got a feeling that I should print a poster of Chris Sabat's voice actor Fusion. That one little tang in the back of my head saved me from going home from Comic-Con empty-handed. Besides all the other cool comics and merch I bought, but for the sake of this story, I'm claiming it was empty-handed. With all the chances of getting Jacksepticeye on boss level squashed like a bug, I resigned to wandering the show floor for a final round to see if I can see any gifts for family members. We did come across this little Gojo plushie from Jujutsu Kaisen that I wound up buying, and then, oddly enough, I found myself back at the Bad Egg Publishing booth. Totally not hoping I might run into Jack on my way out. No, that would be crazy. Could you imagine though? That'd be crazy. That'd be cool. I did purchase a Jacksepticeye comic book from the booth while I was there, because I'm not going to let a series of unfortunate events that was outside anyone's control prevent me from appreciating art. Overall, my first Comic-Con was a really cool experience. However, I can't help but feel like I didn't make the most of it. I was so set on getting the posters signed that I didn't fully appreciate the event as a whole. I also totally forgot that another YouTube channel I love, Drawfee, had a panel at 6:30. Oops. I would 100% attend Comic-Con or any other convention for that matter again, and maybe for multiple days next time. Or, who knows, maybe I'll have a booth or a panel next time. Fingers crossed. Thank you all so much for watching. I know this is a little different from the content I usually do on this channel. I just really wanted to recount my first ever convention experience. And I mean, technically this still is a story and speed painting, just the story this time is a little bit more non-fictional. I also recorded the process of this Calculester art, and I really wanted to show it off because I'm really happy with how it turned out. Jacksepticeye, if you're seeing this, please let me know. Anyway, let me know if you want more storytime videos like this. I'm sure I can dig up a few crazy memories that would make for some good content. That being said, that's all I've got for you today. My name is KyngPin Creations, and I will see all of you in the next video. Take care, everybody.